Hello everyone, welcome to Painting Legends. Sorry for the long delay in the videos, things are finally returning back to normal. Thank you for your patience. Anyway, today we're diving into the Wendigo, the Deerman, and the Not Deer. These creatures share some similarities, making them difficult to distinguish in encounters. The Wendigo originates from Native American folklore as a malevolent spirit or monster, symbolizing greed, cannibalism, and the loss of humanity. It is often depicted as a skeletal, decayed, monstrous figure, sometimes with glowing eyes and antlers in modern portrayals. The Deerman also appears in Native American legend and urban lore, usually depicted as a humanoid figure with deer-like features, such as antlers and hooves. Unlike the Wendigo, which is always a predatory, sinister being, the Deerman's nature can vary, sometimes acting as a guardian of nature or a shape-shifting trickster. The Not Deer, on the other hand, begins as a seemingly normal deer, but becomes unsettling upon closer inspection. These creatures might have human-like faces, forward-facing eyes like a predator, or walk on two legs in a jerky, disjointed manner. Time to tell true stories where people say they encountered these terrifying creatures. The first story is the uncanny road to Tappahannock. In late September 2019, a group of 4 friends set off from Richmond, Virginia. Jen and her friend Anna were making a stop to pick up their friend and her boyfriend along the way, and drove toward Tappahannock, roughly an hour away. The plan was simply to explore the quiet wooded roads once they arrived. Jen was the driver and could recall a general store with a unusual Elvis statue out in the front as a landmark. Anna sat in the front passenger seat while the couple occupied the back. Eventually, they came upon a road that ran straight for about a quarter of a mile, dipping downward in the center before rising again. As they approached the dip, a deer appeared on the opposite side of the road. Jen, always cautious about the risk of hitting deer, slowed down. The deer had its head lowered, but its appearance immediately seemed off. Its legs were strangely misshapen, knobby, and twisted. Jen considered that the animal might be diseased or deformed as they drew closer. Just as they were about to pass, the deer lifted its head, causing Jen and her friend Anna to scream. The deer had a man's face. They were moving slowly enough for Jen and Anna to take in the unsettling details. The deer's neck gave way to human-like skin, and its eyes were wide and startled, almost as if the creature hadn't expected to be seen. Jen turned to Anna and shouted, "Did you see that?" Anna confirmed, exclaiming that the deer indeed had a human face. Meanwhile, the couple in the back, distracted by a minor argument, had missed the entire sighting. Despite their attempts to describe what they had seen, the couple seemed unconvinced of just how bizarre it had been. The road eventually led to a dead end, forcing the group to turn back and retrace their route. As they neared the same dip where they had seen the Deerman, everyone was on high alert. This time, a basset hound puppy emerged from the woods near the roadside on the passenger side. The couple in the back urged Jen to stop for the cute puppy, but she refused, sensing that it could be a trap. Next story, the night visitor of Orange, Virginia. Pete from Orange, Virginia recounted a terrifying encounter he had in the fall of 2016. He described how he had been sitting on his back patio late one night, around 10 p.m., enjoying a cigarette and a few drinks while talking to a friend on the phone. It was pitch black outside, and his yard sloped sharply down to a lake, bordered by thick woods and dense brush. Out of nowhere, Pete heard something massive crashing through the brush, moving rapidly across the yard. Alarmed, he said to his friend, "What was that?" His friend didn't understand what he meant. He explained that something big had just raced through the yard, What puzzled Pete was why the creature would choose to run through the thick bush when there was an open, clear path near the lake. Though he speculated it could have been a deer, he had never seen one in that particular area before. Trying to shake off the unease, he continued his phone conversation. Shortly after, another noise came from the dock area by the lake. Pete remarked, "There it is again." And he said for some reason, his first thought was that it could be kids playing around, even though he had no evidence of that. Feeling compelled to investigate, he walked over to the steep stairs leading down to the dock. As he approached the top of the stairs, something shocking happened. A figure began charging up the stairs toward him. It had a human-like body, but the head of a deer. The creature moved at an unnatural speed, far faster than any human, and its glowing red eyes locked onto Pete's. Stunned, he froze in place, unable to look away from the creature's gaze. The stairway was narrow, only about 4 feet across, and the creature came so close that he could have reached out and touched it. Then, to Pete's astonishment, the being uttered a sound, an unintelligible, rapid phrase made up of 4 or 5 syllables. Just as quickly, it continued sprinting past him and disappeared into the night. When Pete shared the story with a few people, they suggested it might have been a person wearing a deer mask as a prank, but he dismissed that idea. The creature's speed and presence were beyond anything natural. It almost felt as if it had stepped out of another dimension. He also noted that its antlers were peculiar, thin and spindly, resembling twisted tree branches rather than the sturdy antlers of local white-tailed deer. The experience left Pete deeply shaken, and he rarely talked about it. The next evening, he found himself standing at the top of those same stairs, goosebumps covering his skin. He tried to summon the courage to go down to the dock, but ultimately couldn't bring himself to do it. One summer night, at 2:30 a.m., he woke up to loud crashing sounds coming from the woods. He then heard something snorting like a deer, and he lay still, paralyzed with fear, refusing to move. When asked if the creature's body was fully human from the neck down, Pete responded, "Yeah, I think so, but honestly, I didn't really look at its legs. I was too focused on its face, and it was dark." He hadn't noticed any clothes, but he couldn't confirm if it was entirely naked. The whole encounter seemed overwhelmingly intense, and the most vivid details he remembered were the creature's red eyes and the uncanny speed with which it moved. The next story is The Creature Beyond the Woods. This happened in Florida. Kevin, who lived near Orlando, Florida, shared a strange and unsettling experience from about 5 or 6 years ago. One that still leaves him questioning what he witnessed. He'd never heard of Deerman or similar creatures before this event, so when the encounter happened, he was left completely baffled. It all began in the summer when Kevin and his friend Cindy were given a rare opportunity to stay alone for a week in his new rural home in Central Florida. His mother, a school teacher, needed to wrap up the academic year and would stay with Kevin's grandmother nearby. Meanwhile, Kevin and Cindy were excited to explore and set up his new room. They decided to take one of their signature late evening walks, but agreed to do so before darkness set in. As they were unfamiliar with the area, the landscape surrounding their new home consisted of long, isolated driveways, scattered houses set deep in the woods. Just as the sky began to darken, the two set off, enjoying the quiet and new scenery. As they reached a corner of the road around dusk, a massive deer emerged from the trees about 50 yards ahead. Kevin, familiar with deer from his upbringing up north, was stunned at its size. Cindy, having grown up in the city, had never seen a deer up close. They both paused to observe the creature, marveling at the impressive buck and its enormous antlers. Kevin warned Cindy to keep her distance, as large bucks could be dangerous. Within seconds, the deer stepped into the middle of the road and then did something that left both teens horrified. It stopped, slowly turned its head to stare at them, and then, defying all logic, stood up on its hind legs. It began to walk into the woods, but not in a normal way. The deer moved with an unsettling, limping gait. Kevin was frozen, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Cindy, wide-eyed, whispered in shock, "Did you see that?" Kevin barely managed to reply before the two quickly turned around and hurried home. They never went back out for a walk for the rest of the week, and Kevin's mother returned earlier than expected, bringing with her a sense of security. But the strange details continued to haunt him. The most unsettling thing was the creature's legs. Deer normally have backward bending legs, but this one's knees faced forward as if twisted in a way that seemed physically impossible. Despite the deformity, the deer appeared unhurt, though its movement was eerie, stumbling limp. Kevin's mother, who had worked in her family's butcher shop and seen her share of deer injuries, couldn't explain how such a condition would occur and still allow the animal to walk. What also struck Kevin was the smell. A rotten egg odor hung in the air around the deer, possibly sulfuric, though there was no metallic scent of blood. Kevin couldn't recall any other clear features, but the creature's massive size and uncanny behavior were unforgettable. Standing upright, it had to be at least 8 feet tall, even with a slight hunch. Years later, Kevin still has so many questions. Why didn't the creature attack them? Why was something so strange in the middle of Florida? Was it a skinwalker? Or a Wendigo? Or something else entirely? He once tried discussing the event with a Navajo friend, but they refused to talk about it, only deepening Kevin's unease. He's heard of other legends, like fleshgates and Wendigos. Whether it was a severely deformed deer or something supernatural, Kevin will never forget that unsettling encounter. The Rotting Guardian of the Woods. In 2017, while working for the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources, Bob was assigned to investigate reports of a deer sighted along the Ice Age National Scenic Trail in South Kettle Moraine State Forest. The descriptions from these separate sightings suggested that the deer might have chronic wasting disease, CWD. Witnesses described the animal as malnourished, severely injured, and emitting a terrible odor. Bob initially assumed that the deer had suffered an injury, possibly resulting in gangrene. Because the section of the trail where the deer had been reported was difficult to access by vehicle, Bob had to hike to reach the location. The most recent sighting had been reported 24 hours earlier, near one of the public shelters. These shelters were small cabins often used by backpackers. Bob arrived at the shelter just as a thunderstorm began to roll in. He quickly scanned the area for the deer, but the rain intensified, forcing him to seek cover. Setting his backpack down, he sat inside the cabin, but was soon overwhelmed by an intense, nauseating stench of rotten flesh. The odor was so strong that it made him gag, and he searched the shelter for its source, but found nothing. Moments later, Bob thought he saw something move past the doorway. He peeked outside, but there was nothing there. Oddly, the stench disappeared as suddenly as it had arrived. He waited for about 30 more minutes, listening to the heavy rain. The storm hadn't let up when the smell returned. This time, it was accompanied by a deep sense of dread. Though he couldn't explain it, Bob was certain something was terribly wrong. A loud scraping noise then came from the side of the shelter. Bob peered out the window and caught a glimpse of what looked like white antlers. The sight didn't make any sense. It was early summer in Wisconsin, and bucks shouldn't have fully developed antlers yet. Even if they did, they would still be covered in velvet. He assumed that it had to be the injured deer, especially given the foul odor. As he watched, the antlered figure slowly moved towards the shelter's entrance. Something about the situation felt terribly off. Bob grabbed the 12-gauge shotgun he had packed for the deer, loading it with slugs. He aimed it at the door, bracing himself. In the darkness of the storm, he could still make out what stepped into view, and it was not a deer. The creature was nearly twice the size of a mature male whitetail. Its body was skeletal, covered in long, stringy fur with large patches completely bare. The worst part was its head, a skull with no skin or hair, just bone and massive antlers. Its eye sockets were empty, though a gray tongue hung from its jaws. The lower jaw looked barely attached, swaying grotesquely. Terrified, Bob fired 3 shots into the creature's chest. Each slug hit its target, but the monster didn't fall or even stumble. It turned and ran into the storm, vanishing as if nothing had happened. Bob sat, shaken for another hour until the storm passed, then made his way out as quickly as he could. He had never been so scared in his life. If a shotgun couldn't stop the creature, he had no idea what would happen if he encountered it again. When Bob finally reached his truck, he was unsure how to report this incident to his boss. Fearing that telling the truth would make him seem incompetent, he simply stated that he hadn't observed the deer. Not long afterward, he transferred to a new position as a conservation warden, but the memory of that skeletal creature haunted him. This next story takes place in Pennsylvania. A resident of Westmoreland County, Pennsylvania, Greg, had been dealing with unusual occurrences around his home for some time. But a recent event was the most convincing evidence yet that something unexplainable might be lurking nearby. Greg's girlfriend had just returned from vacation in an area once inhabited by the Seneca tribes, which left him wondering if she might have unknowingly brought something back with her. That evening, Greg, his girlfriend, and another friend he lived with took their partially blind dog outside. Oddly, the motion lights didn't trigger, and out of nowhere, a hissing sound erupted from the nearby bushes, which then shook violently. Startled and unsure of what creature was lurking in the dark, they quickly rushed their dog inside. The area was known for wildlife like raccoons, deer, and even the occasional coyote, but this incident felt different. Armed with weapons and flashlights for safety, Greg and his friend went back outside. Determined to protect their vulnerable dog, to add to their concern, a neighbor with a medical condition sometimes wandered the area at night, so they were prepared for anything. As they scanned the woods, they heard a bird call, a sound that kept repeating even though it was 1 a.m. Uneasy and suspicious that the call might be a lure, possibly even from the disturbed neighbor, the two headed back indoors. From the safety of their home, they peered out the patio window. Standing at the fence line was a deer, but it looked wrong. Its back legs appeared twisted and mangled, almost as if they were turned backward. Greg was familiar with a local deer that had a broken leg, but this creature was different and even more unsettling. When they first shone their flashlight at it, the deer's eyes glowed green, but when it lowered its head and they aimed the beam back, its eyes turned red, before changing back to green again. Alarmed, Greg began to suspect that this might not be an ordinary deer at all, but something far more sinister, possibly a Wendigo-like entity. Greg tried yelling at the creature to scare it away, even resorting to calling it a witch. The deer reacted in a way that made his blood run cold. It twisted its head around and stretched its neck unnaturally, staring at him with a gaze that felt otherworldly. Greg, who was no stranger to ghost hunts and haunted places, felt genuine fear. His heart raced. Grabbing his silver cross, he shined the flashlight on it, directing the cross's reflection towards the creature. The deer immediately looked away. Drawing on his religious beliefs, Greg commanded that it couldn't cross the fence without permission. The creature straightened up and slowly walked away, never looking back. Greg returned inside, trying to shake off the fear. His friend went to bed, but when Greg joined his girlfriend in the bedroom, he found her making strange moaning sounds in her sleep. He woke her up only to discover that she had been experiencing a sleep paralysis episode. Shocked, she revealed that she had 2 more episodes earlier, coinciding with the exact time that Greg and his friend had been outside dealing with the bizarre deer. Greg couldn't help but wonder if there was some connection between the terrifying creature and his girlfriend's sleep disturbances. Scary deer in Connecticut. Henry recalled an eerie encounter that happened around 11 p.m. on a warm summer night, as he drove home on a quiet back road in Connecticut. In the distance, he noticed a police car, lights flashing, parked oddly beside a pickup truck. It was strange, the vehicles were parallel, not positioned as they usually would be during a traffic stop. With his windows down, Henry could hear the driver of the truck nervously explaining something to the officer. "It's not hurt, I just found it like this," the man said, his voice filled with fear. He pointed frantically towards something on the road, urging the officer to just shoot it. Curious and uneasy, Henry glanced towards where they were pointing. His headlights revealed a deer sitting unnaturally still, perfectly aligned with the yellow center line of the road. The sight was bizarre. The animal appeared uninjured, yet saliva poured from its mouth, pooling on the pavement. Its head looked unnervingly thin, bobbing as if it were detached from reality, and its legs were crossed in an unnatural pretzel-like position, something that shouldn't be physically possible. A deep sense of dread washed over Henry as he tried to process what he was seeing. It felt as if time had slowed, the moment stretching into something surreal. Despite his fear, he decided to slowly drive around the scene. As he passed, his intuition screamed not to look at the deer, but curiosity got the better of him. The instant he glanced out his passenger window, the deer snapped its head toward him, locking eyes. Its gaze was pitch black, more profound than any darkness he'd ever seen. Henry froze, paralyzed by a cold, intelligent stare that seemed to pierce through him. For what felt like minutes, the deer held him in its unrelenting gaze. Eventually, Henry broke free from the trance and sped away, shaken to his core. Once home, he scoured the internet, learning about strange phenomena like not deer and diseased animals, yet nothing fully explained the unnatural encounter. To this day, Henry can't shake the memory of that night, nor the unsettling feeling it left behind. Next story. Not Deer of St. Louis, Missouri. Jamie was about 10 years old when she saw something she believed she shouldn't remember. Her family lived in St. Louis, Missouri, and her grandfather often took them bowling, preferring a particular shortcut through a wooded area. The Midwest was either sprawling farmland or untamed wilderness, and this was the latter. Towering trees lined the road, and a clearing opened up beside it. One day, as they passed the clearing, Jamie spotted a group of deer. One buck stood closer to the road, about 40 to 50 feet away, separated by a swath of tall grass. It was the way the creature stared that unsettled her. Instead of looking sideways, as deer typically do with their wide-set eyes, this one stared directly at the car, head-on, unblinking. Its gaze was too focused, too deliberate, like a predator's. It wasn't a deer. Its eyes followed the vehicle as it moved, tracking it in a way that no normal deer ever would. That was all Jamie remembered, and to this day, the image of that unusual stare still haunted her. South Dakota roadside encounter. It was around 2 a.m. when Nathan, a college student, drove back to his dorm after a long night at the emergency room. Exhausted and alone on a rural 2-lane highway in South Dakota, he decided to pull over and rest for a moment. Out of nowhere, a group of deer crossed in front of the car, but one of them was wrong. Its back legs appeared broken, yet it walked. Jerky, uneven, with a disturbing hopping motion. As it passed through the headlight's beam, Nathan saw it more clearly. Its neck and ears were elongated, its body distorted. The legs bent unnaturally, as though they didn't belong to it at all. The other deer paid no mind, but Nathan was frozen with terror. Every instinct screamed that this thing wasn't natural. He slammed the car into gear and drove off, heart pounding. Central Pennsylvania cornfield creature. Late one night in central Pennsylvania, Sam and a friend were driving down the highway, trailing behind a large tractor trailer. As they approached a cornfield near Lebanon, they noticed a pair of glowing eyes, high up, just about level with the tops of the corn stalks. Laughing nervously, Sam joked that the deer might jump out, but when the creature stepped into view, any humor vanished. It wasn't a deer. It stood tall, with glowing eyes that were set far too close together, and they reflected the headlights with an unnatural intensity. The moment the full figure came into view, Sam's friend blurted out, "That's not a deer." Panic set in. The creature didn't resemble any known animal. Its proportions were wrong, its presence chilling. The encounter was brief but unforgettable, and Sam had never stopped thinking about what he saw that night. So that's the last of the stories. This is how the picture came out. Thank you guys so much for watching. And a special thanks to our Patreons. We could not do it without you. Thank you so much. Thank you guys so much for watching. Let us know in the comments what you think, and if there is a cryptid or creature that you want to see me paint and do stories about. I was thinking of doing maybe a Hat Man one next. Let me know what you think. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.